Welcome back, boys and girls. We are on chapter 9 of the Tale of Despereaux. And one of the things that I wanted to point out to you is that do you remember how Despereaux's sister was teaching him how to eat the books? The pages of this book, if you ever are able to get a copy of this book for yourself, the pages on the end are all nibbled, like they've been nibbled by a mouse. Chapter 9, The Right Question. The Mouse Council sent Furlough to collect Despereaux, and Furlough found his brother in the library, standing on top of the great book, the great open book, his tail wrapped tightly around his feet, his small body shivering. Despereaux was reading the story out loud to himself. He was reading from the beginning so that he could get to the end, where the reader was assured that the knight and the fair maiden lived together happily ever after. Despereaux wanted to read those words, happily ever after. He needed to say them aloud. He needed some assurance that this feeling he had for the Princess P, this love, would come to a good end. And so he was reading the story as if it were a spell, and the words of it, spoken aloud, could make magic happen. See here, said Furlough out loud to himself. He looked at his brother and then looked away. This is just the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is exactly the kind of thing. What's he doing here, for cripe's sake? He's not eating the paper. He's talking to the paper. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. Hey, he said to Despereaux. Despereaux kept reading. Hey, shouted Furlough. Despereaux, the Mouse Council wants you. Pardon, said Despereaux. He looked up from the book. The Mouse Council, he has called you to sit with them. Me, said Despereaux. You. I'm busy right now, said Despereaux, and he bent his head again to open the book. Furlough sighed. Geez, he said. Cripes, nothing makes any sense to this guy. Nothing. I was right to turn him in. He's sick. Furlough crawled up the chair leg and then hopped onto the book. He sat next to Despereaux. He tapped him on the head once, twice. Hey, he said, the Mouse Council isn't asking. They're telling. They're commanding. You have to come with me right now. Despereaux turned to Furlough. Do you know what love is? He said. Huh? Love. Furlough shook his head. You're asking the wrong question, he said. The question you should be asking is why the Mouse Council wants to see you. There is somebody who loves me, said Despereaux, and I love her, and that's the only thing that matters to me. Somebody who loves you? Somebody who you love? What difference does that make? What matters is that you're in a lot of trouble with the Mouse Council. Her name, said Despereaux, is P. What? The person who loves me, her name is P. Cripes, said Furlough. You're missing the whole point of everything here. You're missing the point of being a mouse. You're missing the point of being called to sit with the Mouse Council. You've got to come with me. It's the law. You've been called. Despereaux sighed. He reached out and touched the words fair maiden in the book. He traced them with one paw, and then he put his paw to his mouth. Cripes, said Furlough. You're making a fool of yourself. Let's go. I honor you, whispered Despereaux. I honor you. And then, reader, he followed Furlough over the book and down the chair leg and across the library floor to the waiting Mouse Council. He allowed his brother to lead him to his fate. Chapter 10, Good Reasons. The entire Mouse community, as instructed by the very most honored head mouse, had gathered behind the wall of the castle ballroom. The members of the Mouse Council sat atop 3 bricks, piled high, and spread out before them was every mouse, old and young, foolish and wise, who lived in the castle. They were all waiting for Despereaux. Excuse me, doggy barking. Make way, said Furlough. Here he is. I've got him. Make way. Furlough pushed through the crowd of mice. Despereaux clung to his brother's tail. There he is, the mice whispered. There he is. He's so small. They say he was born with his eyes open. Some of the mice pulled away from Despereaux in disgust, and others, thrill seekers, reached out to touch him with a whisker or a paw. The princess put a finger on him. They say he sat at the foot of the king. It is simply not done, came the distinctive voice of Despereaux's Aunt Florence. Make way, shouted Furlough. I have him right here. I have Despereaux Tilling, who has been called to sit with the Mouse Council. He led Despereaux to the front of the room. Honored members of the Mouse Council, shouted Furlough, I have brought you Despereaux Tilling, as you requested, to sit with you. He looked over his shoulder at Despereaux. Let go of me, Furlough said. Despereaux dropped Furlough's tail. He looked up at the members of the Mouse Council. His father met his gaze and then shook his head and looked away. Despereaux turned and faced the sea of mice. "To the dungeon!" a voice cried out. "Straight to the dungeon with him!" Despereaux's head, which had been full of such delightful phrases as happily ever after, and lovely ears, and I honor you, suddenly cleared. "Straight to the dungeon!" another voice shouted. "Enough!" said the most very honored head mouse. "This trial will be conducted in an orderly fashion. We will act civilized." He cleared his throat. He said to Despereaux, "Son, turn and look at me." Despereaux turned. He looked up and into the head mouse's eyes. They were dark eyes, deep and sad and frightened. And looking into them, Despereaux's heart thudded once, twice. "Despereaux Tilling?" said the head mouse. "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. "We, the 14 members of the Mouse Council, have discussed your behavior. First, we will give you a chance to defend yourself against these rumors of egregious acts. Did you or did you not sit at the foot of a human king?" "I did," said Despereaux, "but I was listening to the music, sir. I was there to hear the song that the king was singing." "To hear what?" "The song, sir. He was singing a song about the deep purple falling over the sleepy garden walls." The head mouse shook his head. "Whatever you are talking about is beside the point. The question is this, and only this. Did you sit at the foot of the human king?" "I did, sir." The community of mice shifted their tails and paws and whiskers. They waited. "And did you allow the girl human, the princess, to touch you?" "Her name is P." "Never mind her name. Did you allow her to touch you?" "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. "I let her touch me. It felt good." A gasp arose from the assembled mice. Despereaux heard his mother's voice. "Mon Dieu! It is not the end of the world. It was just a touch. What of it?" "It is simply not done," came Aunt Florence's voice from the crowd. "To the dungeon!" said a mouse in the front row. "Silence!" roared the very most honored head mouse. "Silence!" He looked down at Despereaux. "Do you, Despereaux Tilling, understand the sacred, never to be broken rules of conduct for being a mouse?" "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. "I guess so, but—" "Did you break them?" "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. He raised his voice. "But I broke the rules for good reasons, because of music and because of love." "Love?" said the head mouse. "Oh, cripe," said Furlough. "Here we go." "I love her, sir," said Despereaux. "We are not here to talk about love. This trial is not about love. This trial is about you being a mouse," shouted the very most honored head mouse from high atop the bricks, "and not acting like one." "Yes, sir," said Despereaux. "I know." "No, I don't think that you do know, and because you do not deny the charges, you must be punished. You are to be sent, as ancient castle mouse laws decree, to the dungeon. You are to be sent to the rats." "That's right," shouted a mouse in the crowd. "That's the ticket. The dungeon, the rats!" Despereaux's small heart sank all the way to the tip of his tail. There would be no light in the dungeon, no stained glass windows, no library, no books, and there would be no Princess P. "But first," said the very most honored head mouse, "we will give you the chance to renounce your actions. We will allow you to go to the dungeon with a pure heart." "Renounce?" Whoopsie, popped the fire. "Repent. Say that you are sorry you sat at the foot of the human king. Say that you are sorry you allowed the human princess to touch you. Say that you regret these actions." Despereaux felt hot and then cold and then hot again. Renounce her? Renounce the princess? "Mon Dieu!" shouted his mother. "Son, do not act the fool. Renounce. Repent." "What say you, Despereaux Tilling?" I say no," whispered Despereaux. "What?" said the head mouse. "No," said Despereaux, and this time he did not whisper the word. "I am not sorry. I will not renounce my actions. I love her. I love the princess." There was a bellow of collective outrage. The whole of the mouse community surged towards Despereaux. The mice seemed to become one angry body, with hundreds of tails and thousands of whiskers, and one huge, hungry, one huge, hungry mouth, opening and closing and opening and closing, saying over and over and over again, "To the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon." The words pounded through Despereaux's body with each beat of his heart. Very well, said the most very honored head mouse. You will die, then, with a black heart. Threadmaster, he called, bring out the thread. Despereaux marveled at his own bravery. He admired his own defiance. And then, reader, he fainted. Okay, that's the end of chapter 10 and where we're going to stop for today. So I hope that you are enjoying Tale of Despereaux. We are going to be making as our craft tonight a shoebox diorama, or it doesn't have to be a shoebox, but you're going to need a box and some construction paper, some scissors, some things to write with, pens or pencils, and some glue. And I think that's about it. So we'll see you in a little bit for the craft. Have a great night.